The universe works in mysterious ways, connecting souls through the most unexpected encounters. If you've ever wondered whether fate is real, this story might just convince you. Before we begin this journey that changed two families forever, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to catch more stories that will touch your heart and remind you of life's beautiful possibilities. James Morgan adjusted his daughter's backpack as they waited outside the elementary school gates. The sleeve of his shirt rode up, revealing the intricate compass tattoo that adorned his right wrist. 5 years as a single dad had taught him efficiency, one hand holding his coffee, the other keeping 7-year-old Lily close in the morning crowd. The autumn wind carried a distinct chill, matching the one that had settled in his heart years ago. "Daddy, can I go say hi to Emma? Please." Lily's eyes sparkled with the simple joy only children seem to possess. 5 minutes, Lil. The bell's about to ring. James watched as his daughter scampered off toward her friend, her blonde ponytail bouncing with each step. These moments of normalcy were hard-fought victories in their complicated life. He took a sip of his lukewarm coffee and checked his watch. Another day, another struggle to balance work deadlines with school pickups and the emotional labor of being both mother and father to a little girl who still sometimes cried for a mom she barely remembered. "Hello, sir. My mother has a tattoo just like yours." The small voice startled him. James looked down to see a little girl, perhaps Lily's age, with dark curls and eyes that seemed oddly familiar. She was pointing directly at his wrist, to the compass tattoo that most people never noticed or asked about. "What did you say?" James asked, his coffee suddenly forgotten. "You're drawing," the girl clarified, pointing again. "My mommy has the same one, with the star in the middle and everything." James felt the world tilt slightly. The compass tattoo wasn't a common design. It had been customized, a detailed vintage compass with a small north star that doubled as a tiny letter, E, a memento of a past he'd tried desperately to file away. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, kneeling down to the child's level. "I'm Sophie," she replied with the confidence of a child who's been taught to be polite but cautious with strangers. "My mommy's coming to pick me up today. She usually doesn't because she works at the hospital, but today is special." James was about to ask another question when the school bell rang. Sophie gave a little wave and ran toward the building, leaving him frozen in place, his mind racing through possibilities he'd long ago abandoned. The compass tattoo had been designed for only 2 people. Himself and Elena Winters, the woman he'd once planned to marry, before a devastating misunderstanding tore them apart 5 years ago. The woman who had disappeared from his life completely, taking with her only memories and the matching tattoo they'd gotten on a whimsical summer evening. "Dad? Are you okay? You look weird." Lily had returned, tugging at his jacket. James blinked, forcing himself back to the present. "I'm fine, Lily Bug. Just thinking about something. Have a good day at school, okay? I love you." "Love you too, Dad." She hugged him tightly before running off to join the line of students filing into the building. James remained rooted to the spot long after the schoolyard had emptied. If Sophie's mother truly had the same tattoo, could it possibly be Elena? And if it was Elena, what would that mean after all this time? More importantly, the girl's age, could she be? He shook his head. He was being ridiculous. It had to be a coincidence. There was no way Elena would be in this small town, at this very school. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental had just shifted in his carefully constructed life. With reluctance, James walked back to his car, knowing he'd be distracted all day at work. The architectural drawings waiting on his desk would have to compete with the ghosts of his past that had suddenly materialized in the form of a little girl with familiar eyes. Elena Winters rushed through her morning rounds at Memorial Hospital, checking her watch for the 5th time in an hour. Today was Sophie's career day presentation, and Elena had promised to be there. 5 years of single motherhood had taught her the delicate balance of promises: make few, keep them all. "Dr. Winters, we need you in room 307, a nurse called as Elena was updating a patient chart. "Is it urgent?" "I'm leaving early today for my daughter's school event." The nurse nodded apologetically. "The patient is asking for you specifically." Elena sighed, following the nurse down the hallway. Her life was a constant tug-of-war between her responsibilities as a pediatrician and a mother. Most days, she managed the balance with practiced grace, but the weight of doing it alone never truly lifted. An hour later, she was finally in her car, navigating the familiar streets toward Pine Grove Elementary. She absently rubbed her wrist where the compass tattoo lay hidden beneath her watch, a remnant of another life, a reminder of the love she had lost and the unexpected joy that had followed. Sophie had been asking about her father more frequently lately. Elena had always been honest, saying he was a kind man who didn't know about her, explaining that sometimes adults make complicated decisions. But she'd omitted the depth of what had happened between her and James, the miscommunications and pride that had separated them before she discovered she was pregnant. After discovering her pregnancy, Elena had tried to find James, but he had already moved away from their Boston apartment. His phone was disconnected, and mutual friends said he'd needed space. Too hurt and proud to search further, Elena had focused on creating a stable life for her unexpected blessing. When a job opportunity arose in the small town of Maplewood, she took it as a fresh start. Elena pulled into the school parking lot, her thoughts still swirling with the past. As she walked toward the building, she felt the strange sensation of being watched. Glancing around, she saw no one, dismissing it as the usual paranoia that accompanied motherhood. Inside Sophie's classroom, children were taking turns introducing their parents and explaining their jobs. Elena slipped into a seat in the back, waving at Sophie, whose face lit up at the sight of her mother. The teacher smiled and announced that Sophie would be next. Sophie bounced to the front of the room, confidence radiating from her small frame. "This is my mom, Dr. Elena Winters. She fixes kids when they're sick and makes them feel better. She's super smart and knows everything about medicine." Elena smiled at her daughter's exaggeration, feeling the familiar mixture of pride and melancholy that often accompanied these moments, wishing someone else could be here to share in Sophie's accomplishments. As Sophie continued her presentation, the classroom door opened quietly. Elena glanced over, then froze. Standing in the doorway, looking as shocked as she felt, was James Morgan. Their eyes locked across the classroom, and 5 years dissolved in an instant. Next to him stood a little blonde girl who looked to be Sophie's age, watching the presentation with interest. Elena's heart hammered in her chest. What was he doing here? How had he found her? And who was the little girl beside him? Sophie's voice pulled her attention back to the front of the room. "My mom helps people every day. She says that helping others is the best compass in life." Sophie pointed to her wrist, mimicking where Elena's tattoo was. "That's why she has a compass drawing on her arm, to help her find her way." Elena felt the blood drain from her face as everything suddenly clicked into place. The little girl with James, the timing, the school. Sophie must have seen his tattoo. The identical tattoo that matched hers. The teacher thanked Sophie, who beamed and returned to her seat, completely unaware of the storm brewing in the classroom. As the next child went up to present, Elena couldn't tear her eyes away from James, who was staring back with equal intensity. After what seemed like an eternity, the presentations concluded, and parents began mingling with the teacher and collecting their children. Elena stood on shaky legs, making her way to Sophie. "Mom, did you like my presentation?" Sophie asked, bouncing on her toes. "It was wonderful, sweetheart," Elena managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Sophie, can you wait here for just a moment? I need to speak with someone." But before she could approach James, he was already walking toward her, the little blonde girl holding his hand tightly. The classroom seemed to fade away as they stood face to face for the first time in 5 years. "Elena," he said, her name sounding both familiar and foreign on his lips. "James," she replied, struggling to find words adequate for the moment. Sophie looked between the adults, confusion evident on her small face. "Mom, that's the man with the same drawing as yours. I told him this morning." James knelt down to Sophie's level, his eyes studying her face with newfound understanding. "Hello again, Sophie. It's very nice to meet you. This is my daughter, Lily." The blonde girl gave a shy wave. "Hi." Elena felt dizzy with the implications of this chance encounter. She looked at Lily, noting her age, wondering about her mother. Was James married? Her eyes flicked to his left hand, no ring, but that didn't mean anything. "Perhaps we should talk," James suggested quietly, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. "Somewhere more private." The teacher, sensing the tension, approached with a smile. "Dr. Winters, Mr. Morgan, we're having cookies and juice in the cafeteria if the girls would like to join the other children while you chat." Both parents nodded gratefully, and after making sure the girls were settled with cookies and classmates, they found themselves in the empty school library, 5 years of absence stretching between them like a chasm. "Your daughter," Elena began, "she's beautiful." "So is yours," James replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Sophie has your eyes. And your smile," Elena said before she could stop herself. James stared at her, the implication of her words hanging in the air. "Elena, is Sophie?" Elena took a deep breath. The moment she had imagined countless times over the years was finally here, unfolding not as she had planned but as life had decided. "Yes, James. Sophie is your daughter." The words fell between them like stones in still water, creating ripples that would forever alter the landscape of their lives. James sat heavily in a nearby chair, running his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Elena's heart ache. "Why didn't you tell me? I had a right to know." "I tried," Elena said, the old frustration rising. "After we fought, after you left, I discovered I was pregnant. I called your phone, disconnected. I went to our apartment, you'd moved out. I asked Mark and Diane, they said you needed space and didn't know where you'd gone. I was only gone for 2 weeks, James countered, his voice rising slightly. I stayed with my brother in Chicago to clear my head. When I came back to make things right, you were gone. Your friend said you'd taken a job opportunity and didn't want to be found." They stared at each other, the realization dawning that they had both been searching and hiding at the same time, missing each other by days, perhaps hours, their pride and hurt preventing what could have been. "And Lily?" Elena finally asked, the question that had been burning inside her. James's expression softened. "My niece. My brother and his wife died in a car accident 4 years ago. I adopted Lily." Relief and sadness washed over Elena in equal measure. "I'm so sorry, James. It's been hard," he admitted. "But she's the best thing in my life." He paused, looking directly at Elena. "And now I find out I have a daughter I never knew about." The weight of lost time hung between them, birthdays missed, first steps unseen, words unspoken. 5 years of separate lives that should have been shared. "What do we do now?" Elena asked, the practical question belying the emotional turbulence beneath. James looked at his watch, at the compass tattoo partially visible beneath it. "We start with the truth. We tell the girls. Then we figure out the rest together." Elena nodded, tears threatening. The compass that had once symbolized their lost direction might now guide them home. Telling the girls proved both easier and more difficult than anticipated. They gathered at a small park near the school, the children's excitement about missing class tempered by the serious faces of their parents. "Sophie," Elena began gently, "remember how I told you that your father was a kind man who didn't know about you?" Sophie nodded, her dark curls bouncing. "Because you lost each other." "That's right," Elena smiled sadly. "Well, something amazing happened today. We found each other again." She looked at James, who took over with a voice full of emotion. Sophie, I'm your father. And I'm so sorry I haven't been there for you, but I didn't know about you until today. Sophie's eyes widened, darting between the adults as she processed this information. You're my dad? Really? James nodded, afraid to move closer, afraid to frighten her with too much too soon. Sophie turned to Lily, who was watching the scene with confusion. Does that mean Lily is my sister? The adults exchanged glances. Not exactly, James explained. Lily is your cousin. She's my niece, but I adopted her when her parents died. But we live together, like sisters, Lily added solemnly, reaching out to take Sophie's hand. And now you can be my sister too. Sophie considered this with the uncomplicated logic of childhood, then nodded. Okay. She turned to James, studying him with newfound interest. Can I call you Dad? James's eyes filled with tears. I would like that very much. The simplicity of the children's acceptance stood in stark contrast to the complicated emotions swirling between the adults. As the girls ran off to explore the playground, supervised but out of earshot, Elena and James sat on a bench, watching their daughters, their family, with wonder. They're amazing, James said. Resilient in ways we never had to be at their age. Elena nodded, her throat tight with emotion. Sophie's been asking about you more lately. It's like somehow she knew this was coming. Children have instincts we lose as adults, James replied. He hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in his mind. Why did you keep the tattoo? After everything? Elena touched her wrist reflexively. Because even when I was angriest at you, I never stopped loving who we were together. And after Sophie was born, it took on new meaning, a reminder that even when I felt lost, I could find my way. She looked at him questioningly. Why did you keep yours? James smiled sadly. Similar reasons. It reminded me that I had once been certain about something in my life, even if I lost my way. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Elena, I never stopped looking for you. Not really. I checked social media, asked mutual friends. But everyone said you wanted a clean break. And I thought the same about you, Elena replied, the irony bitter on her tongue. Pride and miscommunication, our downfall. James watched the girls playing, Lily showing Sophie how to swing higher. Do you think, is there any way forward for us? Not just as Sophie's parents, but... The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and fear. I don't know, Elena answered honestly. We're different people now. You have Lily, I have my practice here. Our lives are established. Separately, James added. But they don't have to stay that way. Elena looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since their reunion. The years had added subtle lines around his eyes, a touch of gray at his temples. But his eyes were the same, earnest, kind, with that spark of humor she had fallen in love with. One step at a time, she suggested. We focus on the girls first. They need time to adjust, to get to know each other. We need to establish what co-parenting looks like for us. James nodded, accepting her practical approach while his eyes conveyed deeper hopes. I live in Oak Ridge now, only 30 minutes away. I've been working remotely most days anyway, so I could easily arrange to be closer more often. The coincidence of their proximity after years apart wasn't lost on either of them. Somehow, they had orbited each other for years, perhaps drawn to the same area by some unconscious force neither could explain. Sophie has ballet on Tuesdays and swimming on Thursdays, Elena offered, a first small step toward sharing their daughter's life. Lily does soccer on Wednesdays and art class on Saturdays, James replied with a smile. It was a beginning, small, tentative, but real. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of logistics and emotions. James rearranged his work schedule to spend more time in Maplewood. Elena adjusted her hospital hours to allow for family dinners when James and Lily visited. The girls, with the resilience of childhood, adapted quickly, forging a bond that transcended their unusual circumstances. Each day brought new discoveries. James learned that Sophie had inherited not just his smile but his aptitude for mathematics and love of stargazing. Elena discovered that Lily shared her passion for baking and tendency to curl up with a book during thunderstorms. For the adults, reconnection came more cautiously. Coffees after school drop-offs became lunch discussions about the girls' education. Family outings to the zoo evolved into deeper conversations after the children were asleep, excavating the past while tentatively building a foundation for whatever might come next. One evening, 2 months after their reunion, James and Lily joined Elena and Sophie for dinner. The girls had disappeared into Sophie's room to play, leaving the adults to clean up in a comfortable silence that would have been unimaginable weeks earlier. "I have an interview next week," James said suddenly, passing Elena a plate to dry. "An interview? For what?" "Maplewood Architectural Design. They're looking for a project manager." He kept his eyes on the dishes, his casual tone belying the significance of his words. Elena set down her towel. "You're thinking of moving here? What about your job in Oak Ridge?" "I've been consulting more than designing lately anyway. The commute is manageable, but..." He finally looked at her. "I've missed 5 years with Sophie. I don't want to miss any more." The unspoken question hung between them: was he moving for Sophie alone, or was there more? "The girls would love having you closer," Elena said carefully. "Just the girls?" James asked, a hint of their old playfulness returning. Elena smiled despite herself. "Maybe not just the girls." That evening, after James and Lily had gone home, Elena found herself staring at her compass tattoo, tracing the delicate lines with her finger. The North Star that doubled as a tiny E had guided her through the darkest times of single motherhood. Now it seemed to be guiding her back to where she began, but with a wisdom that only time and struggle could provide. The next day, she made a decision. When James arrived to take Sophie for their now regular Saturday morning breakfast, Elena handed him a small envelope. "What's this?" he asked, turning it over in his hands. "Open it when you're alone," she replied, suddenly nervous. James nodded, tucking it into his jacket pocket before calling for Sophie. The day proceeded as normal, James and Sophie's breakfast tradition, followed by a trip to the Science Museum where they would meet Elena and Lily later. It wasn't until the girls were engrossed in an interactive exhibit on gravitational pulls that James remembered the envelope. Finding a quiet corner, he opened it to find a single photograph, ultrasound images he had never seen before, dated 5 years earlier. Written on the back in Elena's precise handwriting were the words, "What I tried to tell you the night we fought. Some compasses take longer to find true north." James stared at the image, emotions overwhelming him as he realized this was Sophie, before she was Sophie, when she was just possibility and hope and unknowing future. This was what Elena had tried to tell him the night of their argument, before pride and misunderstanding tore them apart. Across the museum, Elena watched him from a distance, saw the moment understanding crossed his face, saw him close his eyes briefly as the weight of what they had lost, and what they might still find, settled over him. When he looked up and their eyes met across the crowded room, something shifted. The careful distance they had maintained, the pragmatic approach to co-parenting, suddenly seemed insufficient for the magnitude of what lay between them. James made his way back to Elena, the photograph still in his hand. "You were going to tell me that night," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Elena nodded. "I had just found out that morning. I was terrified and excited, and then we had that stupid fight about moving for your job opportunity. I would have stayed if I'd known," James said with certainty. "I would have turned down Boston, New York, anywhere." "I know," Elena replied. "That's partly why I wanted to tell you in person, not over the phone. And then you were gone." James looked at the ultrasound image again, then at Sophie across the room, laughing with Lily as they experimented with centrifugal force. "We can't get those years back." "No," Elena agreed. But maybe that's not what matters most now. James met her gaze. What does matter? That we found our way back. That our daughters found each other. That maybe our compass wasn't broken after all, just taking the scenic route. For the first time since their reunion, James reached for her hand, interlacing their fingers. The touch was electric and familiar all at once, a homecoming neither had dared to hope for. I got the job, he said quietly. In Maplewood. I start next month. Elena's breath caught. So you're moving here? For real? James nodded. I found a house to rent. It's actually on Maple Street, only about 10 minutes from you. The practical implications and emotional resonance of his decision washed over Elena in waves. James would be part of their daily lives now, not just weekend visits and co-parenting schedules, but school mornings and ordinary Tuesdays and impromptu ice cream runs. The girls will be thrilled, she said, her voice betraying more emotion than her words. And you? James asked softly. Before Elena could answer, Sophie and Lily bounded over, full of excitement about what they had learned. The adult conversation paused, but something had fundamentally shifted, a door had opened that neither seemed inclined to close again. James moved to Maplewood in early spring, just as the cherry blossoms began to bloom along Main Street. The transition was smoother than anyone might have expected, as if the universe was finally aligning what had long been misplaced. Sophie took to having her father nearby with uncomplicated joy, reveling in bedtime stories and weekend projects. Lily blossomed with Elena's gentle influence, gradually healing from the trauma of losing her parents through the stability of their expanding family circle. For Elena and James, rebuilding their relationship was more complex. The people they had been 5 years ago were gone, transformed by separate journeys of single parenthood and personal growth. They had to learn each other anew, James discovering Elena's increased confidence and professional devotion, Elena adapting to James's deeper patience and emotional openness. They established new rituals, Friday family movie nights, Sunday morning hikes in the nature preserve, alternating houses for holiday celebrations. The four of them formed a unit that defied conventional labels but provided the security and love both children needed. One evening in late summer, James invited Elena to dinner, just the two of them, while the girls had a sleepover at a mutual friend's house. He chose a small Italian restaurant on the outskirts of town, intimate but not presumptuous. This feels strange, Elena admitted as they were seated. Being out without the girls. Like we're playing hooky from Parenthood. James laughed. When did we become those people who can't remember life before children? Somewhere between Sophie's science fair and Lily's soccer tournament, Elena replied with a smile. The conversation flowed easily through dinner, reminiscing about shared memories while filling in the gaps of their time apart. It wasn't until dessert arrived that James's demeanor shifted, becoming more serious. Elena, there's something I need to say, he began, setting down his fork. These past few months, watching you with Lily, seeing you and Sophie together, building this unusual family of ours, it's been more than I ever hoped for. Elena felt her heart quicken. It's been wonderful for me too. But I've been holding back, James continued. Because I didn't want to rush you, didn't want to complicate what we were building for the girls. Holding back what? Elena asked, though she suspected she knew. James reached across the table, his fingers brushing against the compass tattoo on her wrist. 5 years ago, we got these to remind us that no matter where life took us, we'd always find our way back to each other. I never imagined how literally that would come true. Elena's throat tightened with emotion. James. I'm not asking for everything all at once, he clarified. I'm not even asking for a definite answer. I just need you to know that I'm still in love with you, Elena. Different now, deeper maybe, but it's there. It never really left. The words hung between them, a declaration and a question all at once. Elena found herself tracing her own tattoo, the compass that had guided her through the darkest nights of early motherhood and now seemed to be pointing toward a future she'd stopped allowing herself to imagine. "I've been afraid," she admitted. "Afraid of disrupting what works for the girls. Afraid of trusting this second chance. Afraid of how much I still feel for you." James's eyes lit with hope. "So you do? Feel something?" Elena smiled, suddenly certain. "More than something. But we have to be smart about this. For Sophie and Lily. We will be," James promised. "One step at a time, just like we've been doing. But honest with each other about where we hope those steps lead." They finished dinner holding hands across the table, the compass tattoos on their wrists aligned as if magnetized to each other. Nothing was decided, no grand pronouncements made, but a door that had been cautiously cracked open now stood wide, inviting possibility. Autumn brought change to the Morgan Winters family constellation. James's lease was ending, and practical considerations about living arrangements became unavoidable conversations. The girls, now inseparable as only sisters of the heart can be, lobbied for a shared home with increasingly creative arguments. "It's wasteful to have two houses," Sophie declared one evening over dinner, her 7-year-old logic surprisingly sound. "Lily and I could share a room, and you and Dad could share one too." Elena nearly choked on her water as James suppressed a smile. "It's not quite that simple, sweetheart," Elena managed. "Why not?" Lily asked innocently. "Don't you like Daddy anymore?" The adults exchanged glances, realizing the children had been observing more than they'd acknowledged. "Of course I like your dad," Elena replied carefully. "We care about each other very much. But living together is a big decision. One that affects all of us," James added. "Which is why we should probably talk about it as a family." And so began a series of family meetings, where dreams and practicalities collided in sometimes messy but always honest conversations. The girls were given voice but not veto power. James and Elena spoke privately after the children were asleep, weighing options against their still-evolving relationship. In the end, the solution came from an unexpected quarter. Elena's elderly neighbor, Mrs. Abernathy, announced she was moving to Florida to live with her daughter. Her house, a charming colonial with a wraparound porch and enough bedrooms for everyone, would be going on the market. "It's perfect," James said when they toured it together. "Close to the girls' school, big yard, separate spaces but room to be together." Elena could see it too, Sophie and Lily racing up the stairs to their adjoining rooms, family dinners in the sun-filled dining room, quiet evenings on the porch swing. But one question remained unanswered. "James, what exactly are we doing here?" she asked as they stood in what could be their bedroom. "Are we buying a house as co-parents? As friends? As people who love each other," James finished for her. "As a family finding our way back together. As whatever we're ready to be, with room to grow into more." Elena studied his face, the face she had once known better than her own, that had become familiar again over months of shared parenting and cautious dating. "I need you to be sure. Not just about me, but about this life. About being a father to Sophie and a father figure to Lily. About small-town life and school plays and ordinary Tuesdays that aren't always exciting." James took her hands, lining up their tattoos as had become their unconscious habit. "Elena, when I lost you 5 years ago, I lost my compass. I wandered, trying to create meaning through work, through raising Lily, through anything that anchored me. But I always felt adrift." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Until that morning when a little girl pointed to my tattoo and accidentally led me home." Tears filled Elena's eyes. "We're really doing this? Buying a house together? Merging our families?" "If you're ready," James replied. "One step at a time, remember?" Elena's answer came not in words but in a kiss, their first since reuniting, tentative at first, then blooming with the certainty of coming home after a long journey. They moved into the house on Maple Street just before Christmas, timing the transition to coincide with the girls' school break. The four of them decorated together, blending holiday traditions from both households into something new and uniquely theirs. On Christmas Eve, after the girls had finally fallen asleep in their new rooms, Elena and James sat on the porch swing despite the winter chill, cups of hot chocolate warming their hands. "Do you think they're happy?" Elena asked, watching their breath form clouds in the cold air. "Really happy, not just excited about presents and new bedrooms?" James considered the question seriously. "I think they're secure, which is the foundation of happiness for kids their age. They know they're loved, they know their family, unconventional as it may be, is solid." Elena leaned against him, drawing comfort from his warmth. "Sometimes I feel guilty about all the time we lost. The family moments Sophie missed with you, that Lily missed with a mother figure." "We can't change the past," James replied, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "But maybe there's a gift in the way things happen too. Sophie got your undivided attention during those crucial early years. Lily and I formed a bond that might have been different otherwise. And we all appreciate this." He gestured toward their home, lights twinkling in the windows, "so much more because we know what it means to live without it." Elena considered his perspective, finding truth in his words. "When did you get so wise?" "Somewhere between midnight feedings and kindergarten drop-offs," he laughed. "Single parenting either breaks you or forces you to find perspective." They sat in comfortable silence, watching occasional snowflakes drift down from the night sky. Elena's thoughts turned to the small velvet box hidden in her dresser drawer, her Christmas gift for James, a watch with a compass face, inscribed with words that acknowledged their journey. "Some detours are part of the destination." "I have something for you," James said suddenly, reaching into his pocket. "I was going to wait until tomorrow, but this moment seems right." He handed her a small package, wrapped in silver paper. Elena opened it carefully to find a jewelry box. Inside lay a delicate necklace, a silver compass pendant with a tiny star at its center, matching the tattoos they shared. "It's beautiful," Elena whispered, touching it reverently. "Turn it over," James encouraged. On the back was inscribed, "For my true north. Forever, J." Elena looked up at him, emotion thick in her throat. "James." "I'm not rushing," he assured her quickly. "This isn't a proposal. Not yet. But it is a promise, that wherever our journey takes us next, we're on the same path, following the same star." Elena closed her hand around the pendant, feeling its weight, substantial yet delicate, like the love they had rekindled. "I think I've been following you since that day at the school. Maybe even before, without realizing it." James took her free hand, kissing her compass tattoo gently. "Then I guess we've been circling each other all along, two compasses spinning until they finally aligned." The porch light cast a gentle glow around them as they sealed this new promise with a kiss, the first Christmas of many they would share in the house on Maple Street, where a chance encounter between a little girl and a single dad's matching tattoos had changed everything. If you were touched by this story of love, loss, and finding your way back home, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of the extraordinary connections that shape our ordinary lives. Sometimes the most amazing journeys begin with the simplest words. "Hello, sir, my mother has a tattoo just like yours."